Hey guys, we're finally going to get to the messaging part of our application. So we're going to start by making this little input bar we have down here into a form. So when we type stuff, we can track it and then create a mutation that sends off to the server and creates a message. And then our messages will pop up here. So let's get started with that. So our send message component here is what we're going to be working on first, and that is what's going to be the form. Right now it's just an input field, so we need to change that. And to make it into a form, we're going to be using Formik. This is what we used for our add channel modal, and we're going to use this here as well. So I'm going to add with Formik, and then I'm going to turn this into a variable, send message, and then I'm just going to export default down below. So with Formik, put the parameters there, and then send message. We'll come back and fill out those. We're going to first add our props up here. Going to add a comma, and we're going to copy the props that we used here and paste them here. So here I'm going to set a name. I'm going to call it message, and we have values. So value is equal to values.message. And again, you want to make sure the name and what you call here matches up. Now we want to do handle change and handle blur, but every time I try in my Visual Studio Code type on change and on blur here, it just basically freezes up. So I'm just going to type it up here and then copy it over. So we want to do on blur is equal to handle blur, and then on change is equal to handle change. Alright, so copy that and let's delete it like that. And I'm just going to paste it in there. Okay, so we have two more things that we want to add here, right? We have handle submit and is submitting. So is submitting, we basically want to stop them from submitting if they are submitting, and handle submit is usually when someone clicks a button, right, to submit the form. But here we don't really have a form to submit. We really just want to submit it when the person hits enter. So we're going to listen for that keystroke. So on key down is what we're going to do, and we're given an event, and we're going to say make this into a regular function, and we're going to say if e.keycode is equal to the key code that is the enter key. So enter key, which is key code 13, enter key we're going to call handle submit, and we're going to say and not is submitting. Alright, so I'm going to grab this prop here and add it here. Okay, so now we are listening for this key code when we are hitting enter, but we're not submitting. We're then going to call handle submit, and we also need to pass in the event and on change, on blur, so all that looks good. So now we just need to add our settings to handle this with Formik. So down here we're doing some stuff. We're going to do a mutation in the handle submit, so we can copy this. So map props to values, we're just going to have a message here. And then our handle submit, we're really just going to have an if statement. So if, I'm going to say values.message. So if not that, or not values.message.trim. So basically they have a blank message. We're just going to say set submitting to false, and we're going to return. And that's kind of how Slack handles it. So if they try submitting a empty form, it doesn't do anything. You just can't submit an empty form. It doesn't show an error because you didn't really do anything wrong. You just have to type stuff. So that's how we're going to handle that. Otherwise, we're going to mutate. So let's write up here the create message mutation. And let's import GQL from GraphQL tag. And I'm also going to import GraphQL. And that's coming from React Apollo. And since we have two higher order components here, I'm going to use compose from React Apollo to make this easier. And if you haven't seen compose, you'll see it in a second. So we want to call this create message mutation that we have. So I'm just going to come over here as usual, come over to 8081 in graphical just to type out our mutation, since it's a little faster with autocomplete and it makes it pretty. So we're going to have a channel ID, which is going to be an int. Oops, and a colon there. And we're going to have text, which is going to be a string. And then here we're going to create a message passing in the channel ID and the text. And it returns a boolean, which is fine. So it's prettyfy, copy, paste that guy over. So now we're going to compose, and we can add our GraphQL mutation in here. So create message mutation, and our with Formik is going to come down here, and we just need to add another curly right here. Give that a save. So now we have these two in the compose function, and the compose function calls send message. So now in here we have the mutation coming from this GraphQL higher order component, which we're grabbing in the props here. We don't care about this on close. We don't care about a channel ID or a team ID. We do care about a channel ID, which let's make sure we're passing in. We're passing in a channel name right now, but not a channel ID. So let's pass that in. So that's going to be channel.id, same as we're grabbing up here. So now we have that prop here. So now in our mutation, we're going to say channel ID, and we're going to say text is going to be values.message. And we don't really care about optimistic UI or updating because we are going to do subscriptions. So on close, doesn't matter, and we can set submitting to false. All right. So if we come over here, we seem to have like smushed the input bar to the side. I thought it had some padding. Send message wrapper. Oh, that's, oh, did I get rid of that? Oh, I accidentally got rid of, oh no, it's right here. I thought this guy had some padding on him. I guess not. Should add it in. Yep. That looks good. Maybe a little bit more. 20. Cool. So now I can type stuff. So hi, hit enter. And we actually don't know. We didn't add any response to see if it worked or not. So if we look in console, nothing. And we didn't even reset the form. So one of the props here is reset form. So we're going to call that instead of set submitting to false. So reset form. Here we're going to reset form. Actually, we're going to do set submitting there because we don't want to get rid of the user's text. So set submitting. So the reason we're calling reset form down here is because we want the text to go to 0. Or we want it to clear down here. So when I type hello and hit enter, we want it to clear just like that. Now we're going to add a little component here now so we can actually see the messages we just created. So in our view team, that's this messages component. Now I'm going to create a messenger or message container, and that's what I'm going to do here. So message container, that's what I'm going to render here, and we're going to pass in a channel ID, channel.id. So message container, and then in our message container, that's where we're going to do this stuff. So up here I'm going to import React from React, and here we're going to create a message container. At first I'm going to make it just a functional component, and then we might change this to a regular component later if we need it. So export default. message container. I already know I'm going to be doing some GraphQL stuff with this, so I'm not even going to bother exporting up here. So right now we're going to have messages, so import that, import messages from upper directory components / messages, and we can get rid of that in view team up here because we don't need messages anymore. Okay, give that a save. So channel ID is now a prop that we get, and we actually don't care about it for messages because that's, if we look at what messages is, it's just a styled div. Oh, messages, there we go. So I don't think we have a query, so let's make that. So I'm going to say type query, and I'm going to say messages, and we want to pass in the messages for a channel. So, or we want to get the messages for a channel, so we're going to pass in the channel ID. So that's going to be an int, and what we're going to return back is messages. So message, it's just going to be an array of messages. So now let's create that. So it's going to be in our resolvers, that's going to be a message resolver. So this is going to be a query. And before we actually, well, let's go ahead and put a stub method. So call it messages, async parent args models user. And for now, we're just going to return an empty array. So I want to work on how we're going to select this first, and then we're going to come back to that. So we're going to have a query. It's going to have a channel ID variable, which is going to be an int, and I'm going to call messages. Oops. Okay, so I need to refresh this. Now messages should autocomplete for me. Yep. Pass in the channel ID. And so what fields do we want to select here? We won't need to know the ID. We need to know the text. We also kind of need to know the user so we can display the username. I'm thinking we're going to use comment cards similar to this. And I think we're also going to be needing created at. That way we can display right here like just what time the message was sent. So I don't think we are showing created at. So that's going to be in our, oh, that's going to be over here. Message, we need to add this prop. So created at, which is going to be a string. And we didn't actually add a created at to our model. This is something that SQLize adds automatically. So refresh, created at, cool. And that should be enough to create a comment card that looks like this. So I'm going to copy this, and our message container, this is going to be the const messages query. This is the query it's going to run. So import GraphQL from React Apollo, and we're going to import GQL from GraphQL tag. And now we're going to call the message query. Now our message query here, or messages query, that is, notice how it needs a variable right here called channel ID, and that's coming from the props. So we can say variables, I believe, I can't remember if it's options. It might be options, and then we get a props, and then out of that we can return a variable component, and then we can say here props dot channel ID. I believe it's something like this. Did we do this in the sidebar component. Are we doing any GraphQL requests here? Nope, we're not. Are we doing it in, what are these? This is the channels component. Oh, we're doing this in the view team. I forgot. Nope, we're not. So we're gonna have to see if this works. If not, we'll look it up real quick. But I believe you can get, there's an options prop that comes in like that to our options, which then we can then create a variables and pass that in. So that's going to be our query. And then so we get a data prop now, right? So data, which is going to be loading and messages. For now, I'm just going to say loading. We're going to display null. Otherwise, we're going to display the messages, which for now, I just want to see what the messages look like. So I'm going to do object dot, or not object, JSON.stringify messages, and see what the JSON response we get is. So let's see. I feel like we made some errors somewhere. Let's see what happens. All right, so we do get an error. Oh, it's in our back end. Required was not provided. Channel ID was required. Okay, so we're gonna go to apollographql.com real quick. Oops, forgot the 0. I think I did the apollographql.com. I think I did this thing wrong where I passed in the props. So if we go to client, React, and then queries, we just want to add a props. So I'm going to look for props. Alright, so that's exactly how we want to do it. So this is going to be called variables. So channel ID. Oh, I did this wrong on a lot of levels. So here's how it should be. So variables, and then we have a returning an array. So let's see if that works better. Cool, and we're actually seeing our empty array. That's exactly what we want. So we're making this request correctly now, and we are passing the channel ID in. The next steps are to actually make our query here in our database, which is what we'll do in the next video. So here we go. So this, we actually need to make our query and then display the cards here. So we're going to take these semantic UI comment cards or comments and display those. So that is it for this video, guys. Thanks for watching. The code will be up on GitHub if you want to check it out.